Tonight, U.S. troops attacked. 3 killed, over 30 injured in a drone strike by Iran-backed militants in Jordan. President Biden calling it despicable.
We shall respond.
We'll have the very latest. Also tonight, border battle.
That's been the simple request of Americans, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. People just want a secure border.
Senators zero in on a bipartisan deal aimed at curbing illegal migrant crossings and expediting the asylum process.
Look, this is a painful compromise. This is a tough bill.
Weather whiplash. After a sudden thaw, snow returns to the Northeast, and the West Coast set for a new soaking. The full forecast straight ahead. Deepening mystery. What happened to 3 Kansas City men found dead, frozen in their friend's backyard? In California, a retired space shuttle is ready for a final lift.
I'm Elise Preston in Los Angeles, where Endeavour is set to soar again after a big move.
And later, we head to Route 66 to meet a man with a history lesson and drawing crowds with something sweet, donuts.
I'm just thankful that we were given the opportunity and we made the best of it. American dream.
This is the CBS Weekend News from Washington with Jerika Duncan.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Tonight, President Biden, as you just heard, says the United States, quote, shall respond following a deadly drone attack on American troops. He blames an Iran-backed militia for the overnight strike. It happened at a remote base in Jordan near the Iraq-Syria borders, underscoring the spreading violence in the Middle East. At least 3 American service members were killed. More than 30 others were wounded, some of them seriously. CBS News Chief National Security Correspondent David Martin has the very latest tonight from the Pentagon. David, good evening.
U.S. officials say the troops manning the outpost on the Jordanian side of the border with Syria had little warning of the incoming drone. Many of the dead and wounded were still in their barracks when it hit. The outpost, known as Tower 22, provides support to U.S. Special Operations Forces operating inside Syria, where they are under constant threat of attack. But until now, Tower 22 had not been attacked. President Biden blamed it on Iranian-backed militias and vowed to retaliate.
We lost 3 brave souls in an attack on our base, and we shall respond.
It was the U.S. military's worst loss of life to enemy action since the fall of Afghanistan, and the first since Israel's war with Hamas set off a drumbeat of more than 160 attacks against U.S. troop locations in Iraq and Syria. Scores of troops suffered concussions in the previous attacks, but there had been only 1 serious injury. Now that the attacks have turned deadly, the Biden administration will be under pressure to launch much more damaging airstrikes against targets in Iraq and Syria. Jerika.
All right. David Martin at the Pentagon tonight. Thank you. As the president confronts a steep rise in violence throughout the Middle East, the administration is also facing a battle in Congress over the immigration crisis at the southern border. But there may be progress on that front. CBS's Skylar Henry is at the White House tonight to explain. Skylar, good evening.
Hey, Jerika, good evening to you. That bipartisan group of negotiators says they've been hammering out this deal for months and are positive about the prospects of an agreement as early as this week with the Biden administration. That's despite sharp criticism from former President Trump.
If that bill were the law today, I'd shut down the border right now and fix it quickly.
President Biden campaigning in South Carolina this weekend says he'll close up the U.S.-Mexico border if at any point it becomes overwhelmed, if Congress approves the bipartisan proposal currently under negotiation in the Senate. Lawmakers are finalizing the language of the plan.
That's been the simple request of Americans, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. People just want a secure border.
CBS News' immigration reporter Camila Montoya Galvez is at the border in Eagle Pass, Texas.
This would be a seismic shift in policy here at the U.S.-Mexico border. The president would be allowed to suspend asylum processing when illegal crossings spike, authorizing border agents here to quickly return migrants back to Mexico across the Rio Grande.
The terms also would raise the standard to accept asylum seekers and shorten the legal review process of their cases to just 6 months. While the immigration challenge remains front and center in Washington, it's also a pressing issue along the campaign trail.
I'll tell you what, A bad bill is, I'd rather have no bill than a bad bill. A bad bill you can't have, and that's what was happening.
I say to President Biden, prove it. Get into a room and get this done and prove it, because the American people are waiting. I put this on Republicans and Democrats. I'm not picking favorites in this. I'm telling you, they have all not done a good job from the very beginning.
Also on the docket, House Republicans released articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas over what they call his failure to manage the southern border, a charge Democrats call a sham.
And Skylar, even with this likely compromise in the Senate, this bill would face an uphill battle in the House as Republicans want even stricter asylum measures. Talk about what's at stake.
Yeah, that's the interesting part of this. Lawmakers in the Senate have signaled they want to move quickly on this deal. Remember, this includes more funding in terms of a vote. That would include more funding for everything from getting more aid to Ukraine and Taiwan, state disaster relief, and provide more support for Israel in its war with Hamas. Jerika.
All right, Skylar Henry at the White House, thank you. Tonight, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is urging governments not to suspend their support for the UN's Palestinian Relief Agency in Gaza. At least 9 countries, including the U.S., paused funding following allegations that a dozen UN staffers were involved in the Hamas attacks on Israel. CBS's Deborah Pata reports from Tel Aviv.
These men try to outrun the hunger stalking Gaza. On this day, bags of flour have arrived. We managed to get just one bag, said this man. Often there is not enough to go around. Many go home empty-handed. We need to eat, shouted this man. Our children are dying of hunger. The suspension of funding could not have come at a worse time. Gaza is on the brink of famine. The aid cuts amount to 70% of the relief agency's annual budget, said Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Eshtia.
This measure is extremely dangerous, and it is our hope that it will be reversed.
For the more than 2 million Palestinians in Gaza who depend on that aid, the cuts are potentially crippling. On top of the constant hunger, now they cut our aid, this woman said. What did we do wrong? It is a collective punishment, said the head of the relief agency, which employs around 13,000 staff members in Gaza. Already, 152 of them have been killed. After nearly 4 months of war, more than 80% of Gazans have had to flee the fighting, forced out of their homes, their misery compounded by rain and cold. The UN organization is often the only source of food and water for those trapped inside Gaza. Now even that meager lifeline could collapse.
The funding cuts come as talks between the U.S., Israel and Qatar in Paris today inch closer to a possible agreement in which it is understood that Israel could suspend its war in Gaza for as long as 2 months in exchange for the release of more than 100 hostages, Jerika, who are still being held by Hamas.
Deborah Pata reporting in Tel Aviv. Thank you. Now to the weather and a whiplash of sorts. Tonight, winter has returned across the Northeast. This is Winsted, Connecticut, where they're already shoveling. More than a foot of snow could fall in some areas after an unprecedented January thaw. Meteorologist Paul Goodloe from our partners at the Weather Channel has more on that.
Jerika, it's the last Sunday of January, but the temperatures this week feeling perhaps more like March than late January into early February here. We're talking at times more than half of the population of the lower 48 above average. But we do see some slight cooling and a trend beginning at the end of the week as we head into next month. But right now we're dealing with a clipper system that will bring some snow across parts of the Great Lakes and into the Ohio Valley and even the Mid-Atlantic as well. The elevation, the mountains here, the Appalachians seeing some bonus snow. We'll take that. We haven't seen that much snow, especially with a warming trend. But looking down the road, we do look for drying air coming into parts of the Great Lakes in the Northeast as we head into next month. But much wetter, but also much cooler air starts moving into the west, and that will slowly push across the nation and finally limit some of our well above average temperatures in the middle of the country. Jerika?
All right, Paul Goodloe, thanks so much. To Hawaii now, when American Airlines flight from Los Angeles made what's described as a hard landing in Maui. It happened Saturday. 5 flight attendants and 1 passenger were sent to the hospital and thankfully later released. The Airbus A320 was carrying 167 passengers and 7 crew. And Boeing 737 MAX 9 jets flown by Alaska and United Airlines are taking off again this weekend. They had been grounded after, you may recall, a panel blew out of one of Alaska's jets, but returned to the sky after being cleared by federal inspectors. Well, tonight, there's a deepening mystery in Kansas City following the deaths of 3 men. Their bodies found frozen in a friend's backyard after watching a night of football. CBS's Astrid Martinez joins us now with more on the investigation and family reaction. Astrid.
Good evening, Jerika. Well, tonight, police say no foul play is suspected, but the grieving family members say they are still eagerly awaiting a medical report that could provide definitive clues into what killed these men or how these men died.
We're in a really hard place right now.
Growing frustration from the mother of David Harrington. Her son, along with Ricky Johnson and Clayton McGinney, were found dead nearly 3 weeks ago, frozen outside a friend's Kansas City rental home. What do you think happened?
Honestly, I don't know. I know my son was not a drug addict. I know these men were not drug addicts.
Police say the longtime friends went to Jordan Willis's house on a snowy January 7th to watch the Kansas City Chiefs play. After the game, family of the 3 men say they couldn't reach them. According to police, 2 days later, one of the men's fiancé went to the house looking for him. When no one answered the door, she says she broke into the home and found a body on the back porch. Police discovered 2 more in the yard. Adriana Juarez is the mother of Ricky Johnson's child.
How do you not know there's 3 dead bodies in the back porch?
Police say Willis, who hosted the men, told him he saw his friends leave through the front door. Then he went to sleep with headphones on and a fan and didn't see texts from worried family and friends. Jordan Willis's attorney says his client is not responsible for his friends' deaths.
Jordan had absolutely nothing to do with the deaths of his 3 friends.
And police say that it could take up to 6 more weeks for that medical report to be released to the public. Jerika?
Astrid, such a bizarre story. Thank you. Well, today marks 38 years since the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded 73 seconds after liftoff from Cape Canaveral. All 7 crew members on board were killed, including the first civilian chosen for a space mission, schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe. The Space Shuttle Endeavour was built as a replacement for Challenger, and it's again making news. CBS's Elise Preston is in Los Angeles with more on that. Good evening, Elise.
Good evening to you, Jerika. Endeavour will soon be the only space shuttle displayed like it's ready for launch. The mission to move the spacecraft has a margin of error of less than an inch. More than a decade after its final flight home to Southern California, Endeavour is now covered in protective shrink wrap and waiting to be lifted by a 450-foot crane and reattached upright to its giant orange fuel tank and twin rocket boosters.
It's very challenging. This is the only place in the world that there will be a full space shuttle stack of all real hardware.
And liftoff of the maiden voyage of Endeavour.
Endeavour blasted into orbit in 1992, and its 25 missions included many firsts, repairing the Hubble telescope, putting Mae Jemison, the first Black woman astronaut, into space, and adding a U.S. component to the International Space Station. In 2011, after more than 120 million miles flown, it came home for good. In 2012, Endeavour hitched a ride to Hollywood on a Boeing 747 and spent 3 days inching its way through Los Angeles to the California Science Center. If the weather holds, Monday it will be in its new museum home, the Samuel Ocean Air and Space Center. Why do you do what you do?
I absolutely love it. It's about inspiring the next generation of scientists, engineers, and explorers.
Now, once Endeavour is in place, a 20-story museum addition will be built around it, but it'll take a few years before it is open to the public. Jerika?
All right, Elise Preston for us in Los Angeles. Thank you. Straight ahead on the CBS Weekend News, the California restaurant taking the express lane to the future. And later, the urgent search to find a prize statue and the thieves who stole it. Well, the robots have arrived, at least in Pasadena, California. That's where the world's first ever fully autonomous AI-powered restaurant has opened, complete with burger flipping bots. We sent CBS's Joy Benedict on a taste test.
Flippy the chef makes Spud spectacular. This automated grill gives the meat its sizzle as this restaurant goes robotic.
For this burger, it would take about 120 seconds.
Cali Express by Flippy is the world's first AI-powered eatery. There's new technology outside the kitchen, too.
A cheeseburger.
Order kiosks use facial recognition to remember you, your favorite food, and how you like to pay. Then watch the robots work. No humans required.
We can't get enough people to come out to work on fryers and grills, and they're dangerous jobs. And this automation helps solve a lot of those issues.
62% of restaurants report being understaffed. Industry experts say most of those unfilled jobs could be done by robots. And in California, where the minimum wage for most fast food workers will soon be $20 an hour, fewer workers equals cost savings. Dan Ives is with Wedbush Securities, a wealth management firm.
Once the minimum wage went to 20, that's the bell going off. More and more focus on spending on AI. Because look, that's inflationary. That's the problem. You can't necessarily pass all that to the consumer.
Flippy can cook 250 pounds of French fries an hour. The burger bot, 100 patties.
These restaurants are very, very busy at peak times, and every second that gets added to somebody waiting in the drive-thru is a lost revenue opportunity for that restaurant.
Is it costing people their jobs?
That's not what we've seen. It's really here to help people.
Humans at Cali Express will put the finishing touches on orders. For customers, the price of the meals are competitive. As for taste,
is it going to affect the quality and the taste?
I would say yes, in a good way, because now each burger is being cooked precisely the same way every time.
Time will tell whether AI takes over kitchens everywhere. That will be up to the public to chew on. Joy Benedict, CBS News, Pasadena, California.
Well, all righty. Still ahead on the CBS Weekend News, a historic win following an upset down under. The sounds of cheers. The Australia Open has a new men's champion. Today, Italy's Jannik Sinner clinched his first Grand Slam title, rallying from 2 sets down to defeat Russia's Daniil Medvedev. To Wichita, Kansas now, where a search is underway this weekend for a statue of baseball icon Jackie Robinson. All that remains are the shoes. Vandals sawed off the bronze statue from its place at a Little League park. Surveillance video shows it being hauled away in a pickup truck Thursday night. Outraged city leaders say getting it back is a top priority. What a shame. Well, next on the CBS Weekend News, the California man sharing his sweet specialty and layered history. We'll explain. Finally tonight, we introduce you to a California man who's been attracting crowds for decades, one donut at a time. Here's CBS's Adam Yamaguchi.
Off of Route 66 in Southern California, this small donut shop has been a community fixture for decades.
Yeah.
Jim Nakano is the donut man. He opened the shop with his wife in 1972.
Why donuts? Because my wife likes hot donuts.
And she's not the only one. From glazed to signature strawberry, there's no shortage of crowd pleasers.
Come to Glendora, have a strawberry donut. They're terrific. This is our specialty. Oh, that is so good.
As uniquely American as the donut, so too is Nakano's personal story. During World War II, at just 2 years old, he was sent with his mother to a Japanese-American internment camp.
So many Americans do not know about this chapter in our history. And some of them don't believe it, that our country would do that to people.
You don't want that history to die.
learn about your culture, learn about your family, and all that, because that'll make us closer.
A family that now extends to the entire community.
This donor shop has given us so much opportunity to meet different people. I'm just thankful that we were given the opportunity and we made the best of it. The American dream.
Adam Yamaguchi, CBS News, Los Angeles.
And that is the CBS Weekend News for this Sunday. I'm Jerika Duncan. From all of us here in Washington, we thank you. Good night.